Okay, hi everyone. I'm making this video because a lot of the classes that I teach, one of the things that they struggle with the most is the concept of genetics and inheritance, and generally how things work regarding DNA and genes and alleles and things like that. One of the hardest topics to understand is genetics. There's a lot of words that are specific to this subject. It's really hard to remember, it can get a bit confusing. So I'm just going to try and make this quick summary video just to help you people out. If you're doing a GCSE, this is a perfect level for you. Okay, so I'm going to start off explaining the very fundamentals of genetics, what alleles are. I'm going to start talking about inheritance. I'm going to talk about genetic disease. I'm going to talk about chromosomes. Hopefully by the end of this video, or after a couple of re-watches, you have a better understanding of essentially what it all means. Okay, so starting it all off, the first thing, the most basic thing that we need to know is that as a human, and I'm presuming you're a human because you're watching this, as a human you'll have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Now a chromosome is a little X-shaped thing that you can see on the screen. It's a molecule that you find within your body and that houses all of your DNA. Now the vast majority of the features that you have, your hair colour, your eye colour, your height, is all controlled by genes which are within these chromosomes. Now you've got 23 pairs of chromosomes. They are paired up, which means you've got 46 individual chromosomes all together. If you look at that picture, you can see that there are little X shapes all paired nicely next to each other. The reason for this is that you get 23 chromosomes from your dad, you get 23 chromosomes from your mum, and they join together in pairs. Now the pairs are the chromosomes which more or less code pretty much the same features as each other. So those two crosses, those two chromosomes that you can see with the 1 underneath them, those will code for pretty much the same features. The ones with 2 will code for the same features as each other as well. So you get 1 from your mum, 1 from your dad, and they pair together, and as a result of those pairs, you have the features that you end up being born with. So each chromosome is made up of long coiled molecules of DNA. So you can see those banded stripes within that X shape. All of those are long coiled molecules of DNA. What is DNA? Well, DNA is the fundamental code that controls how your body works, how your body appears, pretty much everything that your body does. Okay, and this chemical, this DNA, is divided into different regions called genes. Okay, now a gene is a section of DNA that codes for a particular task, a particular feature. Okay, and a DNA molecule contains 4 different molecules, each called bases. So going from sort of highest to lowest, you've got your chromosomes, which contain long coils of DNA. These DNA are based in regions on the chromosome, which are called genes. And each individual DNA molecule has got 4 different bases that make up your coding. So everything that your body does is coded by 4 different bases at sort of the most fundamental level. Okay, and each gene is made of a pattern of these 4 bases. Now I understand this is a little bit tricky to kind of get your head around at first. We're going to go through it step by step, and hopefully you'll be able to understand it a little bit better by the end of it. So this is a DNA molecule. Okay, so your chromosomes are made up of loads and loads of these all wrapped together, and it's based in what's called a double helix structure. The reason it's called a double helix structure is because you can see in the picture there are 2 bands and they wind around each other. Double being as 2 of them, 2 bands, and they wind around each other in a helical structure. That's what we call that pattern. It's a helical structure. So DNA is a double helix. And each of these sort of bands is actually a sugar phosphate backbone. We call it a backbone, and these sugar phosphate backbones have got lots of different things attached to them. And these little coloured things that you can see in the picture are the bases that I was referring to a minute ago. So there are 4 bases. Okay, you can see in the picture the sugar phosphate backbone, there's 2 of them, they wind around. And the coloured ones, the ones that are red, blue, green and yellow, are the 4 bases. Okay, and you've got 4 of these which are responsible for coding everything that your body does and every feature that your body has. So they are guanine, thymine, cytosine and adenine, and they bind together in a particular way. Adenine and thymine will always bind together. A and T will always pair. If you look at this picture, the yellow thymine is bound to the blue adenine. They will always bind together, and likewise C and G, cytosine and guanine, will always bind together as well. If you look at the red cytosine and the green guanine, they're always bound together. Okay? And they bind together, you can't see it in the picture, but they bind together using hydrogen bonds. Okay, and these bonds are reasonably strong bonds that keep the DNA held together and keep it in that structure. Okay, so these bases will not pair in any other way. You'll never see A and C binding together. You'll never see T and G binding together. It's only possible for them to connect A to T and C to G. And quite often in exams, you'll be given one rung of DNA that says A, T, C, C, G, G, A, T, and you'll be asked to name the appropriate base pair. If it's an A, always binds to a C. If it's a T, if it's an A, always binds to a T. If it's a C, always binds to a G. Okay? So, DNA controls how cells function while controlling the production of proteins. Now, proteins are phenomenally important to your body because a lot of proteins are enzymes. If you look at my last video, enzymes are catalysts which promote reactions that occur in the body. They speed up chemical reactions and they're vital to your survival. And every single gene codes for a protein. So every gene, that's a little section of the chromosome, binds for an individual protein, and each protein's got a different sequence of bases. So if you look at this convoluted series of GTAC, GCTAG, etc., etc., that is the base pair code for a particular gene. And each gene will have a different code like this. Much like computers will code in 10110010 in binary coding, DNA will code with these four bases, GTAC, GGCG, etc., etc. Each protein has got its own specific code. And if that code is changed, things can start to go a little bit wrong. Okay, so in terms of genes, all of those different bases aren't always going to be active all the time. Because only some of the full set of genes are used in any one cell. Some genes are switched off. As you age, as you encounter different things, some genes are repeatedly getting switched on and off depending on what your body needs to do and the different circumstances it encounters. So genes aren't necessarily always active. So if we look at this rung of base pairs, the ones that are highlighted in red or orange, I can't really see, in red or orange, those can be switched off. And if your body needs to produce a protein, that code can switch back on again. So genes can be switched on and switched off depending on circumstances. So it's not a case that a gene is always active. Which is why sometimes you'll see people going through life and all of a sudden will develop a genetic condition. It's because that particular gene has suddenly become active. Okay? So how do you get these genes? What determines the genes that you have? You are very individual. Now you share the majority of your genes with every other human on the planet. You actually share the majority of your genes with most living organisms. The difference between individual genes, the difference between people certainly is tiny, in a sort of 1% difference rate. Tiny, tiny changes, but it leads to vast amounts of differentiation. If you look at different people, they all look different, they all sound different. Even though most of their genes are the same, they do have slight differences. And what determines those differences? Well, there's a process called meiosis. Now, meiosis is a process that your body uses to produce gametes. Gametes is an important word. Gametes is the technical term for the sex cells. In males, that would be the sperm. In females, that would be the eggs. So, if you're a male, your gametes are your sperm. If you're female, your gametes are your eggs. Now, these cells have only got 23 chromosomes. Not 23 pairs, but 23 individual chromosomes. Now, let's think about how eggs and sperm work. If an egg joins to a sperm, they combine, which means if an egg's got 23 chromosomes and a sperm's got 23 chromosomes, they join together, you have 46 chromosomes, you create a full set, and that's when you get fertilization. And it's those genes that bind together that enable you to have the genes that you have. So you'll get half your genes from your mum, from the egg, half the genes from your dad, from the sperm. And the genes that are within each of those varies. There is variation within these genes. If you look at this picture, you can see that each of the cells, you can see that there's a red and there's a blue ones. Each of the cells, they can swap different sections of genes. And this leads to variation, which is hugely important in terms of survival, because the more varied your offspring are, the higher the percentage, the higher the chance that they'll be able to survive different environmental pressures there are. Okay, so 23 chromosomes in sperm, 23 chromosomes in egg, join them together, you get 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, and that's what starts you off. That's how you're fertilized, and that's how you began. and that will determine what genes you get. Now, because each egg and sperm got a random combination of genes, not every sperm is the same, not every egg is the same, they'll have different combinations of genes. When they mix, every mixing of the sperm and egg will cause variation. It's why, unless you're identical twins, it's why your brothers and sisters resemble you but are different. It's why you've got differences to your siblings, because not every sperm, not every egg have got the same selection of genes. Okay? And variation, like I said, massively important, because variation allows different people to overcome different environmental pressures. So, genes are in control of your characteristics. You've got specific characteristics. You will have brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, brown hair. You could be tall, you could be short, you could have big feet, I've got very large feet, you could have small feet. You could be naturally, you could put on muscle really easily, you could be naturally really skinny, you could naturally just carry more fat. A lot of this is dependent entirely on what genes you have got. Now obviously, what you do in your environment can control your appearance and can modify that, but fundamentally, most of your initial characteristics are based on your genes. So, all characteristics are controlled by a minimum of 2 genes. Eye colour will be controlled by 2 genes, one from your mum, one from your dad, and those will be the pair that together, the paired genes. Different genes that control the same features called alleles. So, let's say we've got a gene for eye colour. Now, let's say your mum's got brown eyes, your dad's got blue eyes. In order for them to have those different colour eyes, they'll have the eye colour gene, but your dad will have alleles that control the blue, your mum will have alleles that control the brown. So alleles are different variations of genes that control the same feature. Okay? Now, alleles can either be dominant or recessive. Now, obviously, if a gene is controlled by 2 different genes, a feature is controlled by 2 different genes, you're not going to have just like a fusion of those genes. You can do, and that can get into sort of more elaborate genetics, but fundamentally one of those genes is going to take control. Okay, so one of them is going to be dominant, and that's the gene that will give you that feature. Now, if you have the dominant brown-eyed gene, okay, we say that gives you a phenotype of brown eyes. Your phenotype, Phenotype, is how that characteristic is expressed to the world, is how that characteristic is actually expressed in your body. You could also have a recessive blue-eyed gene, so you'll have the gene for blue eyes, but you won't actually have blue eyes because that gene will be recessive, it's not expressed. The brown-eyed gene will be expressed. We're going to go into that in a minute. So individuals can be either heterozygous or homozygous. Lots of new words, lots of quite challenging words here, okay? Heterozygous simply means you have got one of each allele. So you could have a dominant brown-eyed allele and a recessive blue-eyed allele. It means you've got 2 different types of alleles. You could also be homozygous. It basically means that you've got that each of the alleles that control your eyes are the same. And this doesn't just apply to eyes, it applies to lots of other features as well, like things like that. But homozygous, you've got a brown-eyed gene, they're exactly the same, they work together, you have brown eyes. Heterozygous, you could have the dominant brown-eyed gene, the recessive blue-eyed gene. The dominant brown-eyed gene is stronger than the recessive blue-eyed gene, so you have brown eyes, but you carry the blue-eyed gene. And we're going to go into that in more detail now. So, gender is similar, it's a bit more basic. It's determined by the sex chromosomes that you have. So, in humans, we've got male and female, and the male is somebody who has got an X chromosome paired with a Y chromosome. If, when the sperm and egg combine, the sperm is carrying a Y chromosome and the female is carrying an X chromosome and they join, you get an individual with an X and a Y chromosome and they end up becoming male. Now, because males carry an X chromosome, it means that their sperm could also carry an X chromosome. So if a male sperm with an X chromosome, meets a woman's egg with an X chromosome and they join, 2 X chromosomes come together, you end up with a female offspring. You end up becoming female. Okay? So dependent on which of the sex chromosomes the sperm and the egg, or the egg will always carry an X chromosome, but depending on which chromosome the sperm carries will determine whether you're born male or female. If the sperm's got Y, you become male. If the sperm carries an X, you become female. So, This is an interesting picture actually. The picture is an image of somebody with two different eye colours. That's called heterochromia, and that's quite rare and that's quite elaborate, so I'm not going to go into that. That's a cool picture. So let's have a look at the alleles for eye colour. We've got a capital B there. That capital B, the fact that it's in capitals, indicates that it is a dominant gene. So capital B is the gene for brown eyes. Okay, the dominant gene, and that codes for brown eyes. Lowercase b is the gene for blue eyes. Now the lowercase indicates it is a recessive allele. Okay, it's a recessive allele, and that's the gene for blue eyes. So in this case, the potential combination of alleles it can get is capital B, capital B. So dominant brown and dominant brown. Get those two together, you're going to have brown eyes. You can also get dominant brown, and that can combine with a recessive blue eye gene, which is the lowercase b. In that case, because the brown is dominant, you will express brown eyes, but you will carry the blue eye gene. You could also get a lowercase b and a lowercase b. In that case, there is no dominant allele overpowering the blue eye gene. You will have blue eyes in that case. Okay? So, we've discussed this already. The stronger gene is dominant and is represented by a capital letter. Okay? Now, the masked gene, the one that has its features, its phenotype hidden, is recessive and it's shown in lowercase. So, we can also inherit diseases. We don't just inherit features. It is possible to get diseases from your parents that are carried in genes. Okay? So cystic fibrosis is an example of this. Now people with cystic fibrosis have got a very thick, sticky mucus which covers their airways and lungs. Now it has to be cleared, it has to be medically cleared. They can't clear it themselves. So if it doesn't get cleared, it can lead to serious chest infections, and that's a disease that's caused by a recessive allele. Okay? Now, if a person is heterozygous, which means they've got one of each of the genes, they've got a dominant C and a dominant capital C and a lowercase recessive C, then they're a carrier, but they've got a normal phenotype because it's a recessive gene that causes cystic fibrosis. If there is a dominant gene present, you will not have cystic fibrosis, but you can carry that recessive gene, which means that if you were to have children with somebody who also has who's also a carrier, you could potentially pass it on to your children. Okay? So what happens if a carrier and a normal person want to have children? What are the chances of a child having the disease? So this is a graph, and this is a graph that allows you to determine the chances of any feature being inherited when it's based on two different genes. Okay, so let's have a look at the parent's phenotype here. Now the phenotype, like I said, is how something is expressed. The phenotype is how it actually occurs in your body. So on the left-hand side, we've got the normal phenotype, which means they've got two dominant genes that control for whether or not you have cystic fibrosis. On the other side, we've got the carrier. Now the carrier doesn't actually themselves have cystic fibrosis, but you can see they do have a lowercase c. Now because cystic fibrosis is carried in the recessive gene, they are carrying cystic fibrosis. They don't have it because they have a dominant gene that prevents it from occurring, but they do also carry a recessive gene. Now, when they produce gametes, obviously they will have 46 chromosomes. Gametes will have half that number. When they produce gametes, the normal person is always going to produce gametes with the normal gene. They're not going to produce gametes with the cystic fibrosis gene. So they can only go capital C, capital C. Okay? The carrier, when they produce gametes, is either going to produce a sex cell, a gamete, with either the normal gene, in which case that's fine, or their recessive gene is going to end up in that gamete. Okay? Now, any of these combinations of gametes can lead to either the zygote, which is the potential child, which will develop into a person. The zygote will end up with either two capital C's, in which case they're fine, because that's the gene that doesn't have cystic fibrosis associated with it, or they can combine and they can have the recessive gene, the one that does cause cystic fibrosis. So in this case, there is a 50% chance that each of these individuals will produce a carrier of cystic fibrosis, but none of their children will actually have it. So if they were to have 4 children, statistically, 2 of those children will be fine and won't be able to pass it on. 2 of those children will also be fine, but will carry the cystic fibrosis gene. Now, if two carriers wanted to have children, that's when things become problematic. So, if a carrier and another carrier wants to have children, we end up with this graph. Now, if you look, it's much the same. We've got the carriers, they're both carriers, which means they both have a normal gene and both have a gene of cystic fibrosis. When they produce gametes, they halve the number of chromosomes, so they end up with just one of those alleles. Now, the carrier is going to produce a gamete with either the normal gene or the cystic fibrosis gene. The other carrier, which they're going to mate with, is going to also produce either a gamete with the cystic fibrosis gene or a normal gene. Okay, so let's say the normal gene is in the sperm and a normal gene is in the egg. If a dominant gene meets a dominant gene, sperm and egg, the individual child will be absolutely fine and won't have cystic fibrosis. Okay, if a dominant gene meets, let's say a dominant gene within a sperm meets a recessive gene within an egg, that offspring is going to be a carrier. Okay. However, if a sperm with a recessive gene meets an egg with a recessive gene, they join together, the two recessive genes will not have a normal gene associated with them. That will lead to that child having cystic fibrosis. So if two carriers were to mate, there is a 25%, that's 1 in 4 chance of that individual, that child, having cystic fibrosis. Okay? I appreciate the way I'm explaining it is a little bit difficult. Study the graph, read it a couple of times, hopefully it makes sense. Okay? Sickle cell anemia is another disease that can be transmitted genetically, and this causes red blood cells to change their shape. If you look at the picture, there's some normal red blood cells, and one that is sickle shaped, so sort of like a half moon shape. Okay? Now this means that the oxygen cannot be carried as efficiently because they get stuck in blood vessels, they can't pick up oxygen efficiently, they can't carry oxygen. So people with sickle cell anemia get tired very easily, they can't do that much physical exertion. There is one upside to it, it does prevent you getting malaria, but having said that, ultimately it's not really worth it. So the allele responsible for sickle cell anemia, much like cystic fibrosis, is recessive. So it's the same thing. If somebody with sickle cell anemia, this was a carrier of sickle cell anemia, and they mated with a carrier of sickle cell anemia, if the recessive gene was in their sperm and the recessive gene was in the egg of their partner and they met, they would produce somebody with sickle cell anemia. So if you look at this graph, the zygote phenotype is the important one. Okay, the genotype is the genes that they've got. So in this case, there is a 25% chance of that person, of that offspring, suffering from sickle cell anemia. Okay, there's also 25% chance of them being completely fine. So genetic variation is caused by a few different things. Okay, so everybody is different. Everyone is varied. That's because of genetic variation, because we don't all have exactly the same genes. So genetic variation can be caused by mutation. It can be caused by gametes, random combination of gametes meeting, and it can be caused by fertilization. Different sperm and different eggs meet, they create different people. So gene mutations occur when the DNA-based sequences are altered or they're changed. So going back to the beginning of this slideshow, if that long combination of CG80, CG18 was changed by 1 or 2 base pairs, let's say CCGT was changed to CCGA, that would mean that it would code for potentially a different protein. Okay? Most of the time this is harmless. There will be mutations happening in your body all of the time, and because there's so much DNA, and actually quite a lot of it doesn't do that much, a lot of it's completely harmless. Sometimes it'll be beneficial, other times it can be harmful. When it is harmful, it can cause things such as cystic fibrosis or Down syndrome. Okay, and like I said, mutations can be caused by lots of different things. Excessive sun exposure can cause mutations. You get random mutations occurring in your body anyway. Radiation can cause mutations. Majority of the time, they don't do that much. Other times, they can lead to genetic diseases. Now, cancers are also caused by mutations in genetic sequences, which stop cells from essentially knowing when to turn off. So you can also get mutations caused, for some skin cancer, for example, caused by ultraviolet radiation, which modifies the genetic coding of certain proteins in your body, which in some cases will cause your skin to just proliferate tumors. It will just cause cells to grow and grow and grow and grow, and that's what causes cancer. Okay, so I appreciate there's a lot to take in there. That is just a run through about 3 or 4 lessons that I would do normally. So feel free to redo it a couple of times. If it was helpful to you, let me know, write something in the comments. If it wasn't helpful, sorry, I tried. There are lots of other videos on YouTube you can have a look at. Cheers.